Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Srila Prabhupada. Gaur Premanande Haribo, Namah Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prestaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namne Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pricharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskrityam Naram chaiva narottamam Daivim sarasatim vyasam Tato jayamudirayat Nastapraeshu vabhadreshu Nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati uttama shloke Bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. We're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 15, beginning with text number 14 and 15, and then going on to 16, because there's no purport. Sorry? Really? Oh yeah? Okay.
जिनको भी हिंदी अनुवाद चाहिए तो नादिया कुमार प्रभु पीछे रहेंगे, आप उनके साथ बैठ सकते हैं और अनुवाद सुन सकते हैं.
Can you want to read the prose for me?
Yeah, that we can do.
Yeah, we should read 14 and 15, and then we should read 16.
हम आज स्कंद 5 अध्याय 15 जिसका शीर्षक है राजा प्रियव्रत के वंशजों का यश वर्णन, श्लोक क्रमांक 14, 15 और 16 पर चर्चा कर रहे हैं. 14 और 15 का अनुवाद इस प्रकार से है. गयंती के गर्भ से महाराज गय के 3 पुत्र हुए, जिनके नाम थे चित्ररथ, सुमति तथा अवरोधन. चित्ररथ की पत्नी ऊर्णा से सम्राट नाम का पुत्र प्राप्त हुआ. सम्राट की पत्नी का नाम उत्कला था, जिसके गर्भ से सम्राट को मरीचि नामक पुत्र का लाभ हुआ. मरीचि की पत्नी बिंदुमती से बिंदु नामक पुत्र हुआ. बिंदु की पत्नी सरघा के गर्भ से मधु नामक एक पुत्र ने जन्म लिया. मधु की पत्नी सुमना से वीरव्रत और वीरव्रत की पत्नी भोजा से मंथु तथा प्रमंथु नाम के 2 पुत्र उत्पन्न हुए. मंथु की पत्नी सत्या से भौमन नाम का पुत्र और भौमन की पत्नी दूषणा से त्वष्टा नामक पुत्र उत्पन्न हुआ. त्वष्टा की पत्नी विरोचना से विरज नाम का पुत्र हुआ और उसकी पत्नी विसूची के गर्भ से 100 पुत्र तथा 1 पुत्री उत्पन्न हुई. इन सभी पुत्रों में सतजीत नाम का पुत्र सर्वोपरि था. 16वां श्लोक का अनुवाद इस प्रकार से है. राजा विरज के संबंध में यह श्लोक प्रसिद्ध है, जिसका अर्थ है अपने उच्च गुणों तथा व्यापक कीर्ति के कारण राजा विरज उसी प्रकार से प्रियव्रत राजा के वंश के मणि हो गए, जिस प्रकार भगवान विष्णु अपनी दिव्य शक्ति द्वारा देवताओं को विभूषित करते और उन्हें आशीष देते हैं. तात्पर्य: पुष्पित वृक्ष अपने सुगंधित फूलों के कारण उद्यान में अच्छी ख्याति अर्जित करता है. इसी प्रकार यदि किसी वंश में कोई प्रसिद्ध व्यक्ति होता है तो उसकी उपमा वन के सुगंधित पुष्प से दी जाती है. उसके कारण पूरा वंश इतिहास प्रसिद्ध हो सकता है. चूँकि श्री कृष्ण ने यदुवंश में जन्म धारण किया, अतः यदुवंश तथा यादव लोग सर्वदा के लिए विख्यात रहे. राजा विरज के प्रकट होने से महाराज प्रियव्रत का वंश सदा से प्रसिद्ध रहा. इस प्रकार श्रीमद् भागवतम के 5वें स्कंद के अंतर्गत राजा प्रियव्रत के वंशजों का यश वर्णन नामक 15वें अध्याय के भक्ति वेदांत तात्पर्य पूर्ण हुए.
Go ahead. You can read. You want to read 16? You want me to read it?
Is Maharaj ji, I have completed.
Okay.
Purport also.
Yeah.
Completed.
Yeah.
I have read.
You read already?
Yeah.
16 also.
Yes.
Okay. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmilitanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stabitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasade Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is the last verse of this chapter, chapter 15. We're hearing about the descendants of Priyavrat. So I thought it might be helpful to just quickly review what's been covered in this 5th canto. It began with the activities of Maharaj Priyavrata himself. Maharaj Priyavrata being the eldest son of Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu had 2 sons, Uttanapad and Priyavrat. But Priyavrat, from the early age, gone off to be with Narada Muni, gone off to the mountains to do tapasya, and he didn't have interest. So Uttanapada took the throne when Swayambhuva Manu wanted to retire. Uttanapada became the king, and he was ruling for a long time. But then, what happened then? Oh, well, different people die. They give up the body, and Priyavrata still hadn't come back. They went all the way to the Prachetas, and the Prachetas were ruling, and there was no descendant. And then they needed somebody to rule. So then Swayambhuva Manu, along with Brahma and Indra, they all came there and got Priyavrata to come back and to rule. And so Priyavrata entered into householder life, and at the same time, he remembered the lotus feet of the Lord. He kept his devotion. It's not necessarily true that entering into family life means that you become degraded. There are many great devotees in householder life, and Maharaj Priyavrata was certainly one of them. So then the next chapter, chapter 2, is about the son of Maharaj Priyavrata, Agnidra. Agnidra, he was the son, and we hear about his activities, and then after Agnidra, then comes Nabi. And from Nabi, then the son of Nabi, Rishabdev. And Lord Rishabdev is described there in his activities. Lord Rishabdev, of course, is like in the Jain religion, he's very prominent. He's like the Tirthakar, the first Tirthakar there in the Jain teachings. And Rishabdev is an incarnation of Lord Vishnu. He's described here about his activities. He's actually the Supreme Lord himself. So there's several chapters about Lord Rishabdev. And Lord Rishabdev had 100 sons. He was also in family life, and he had 100 sons. And his oldest son was a very great devotee, Maharaj Bharat. And that's described. Actually, he had all of his sons were really good personality. There was the 9 Prachetas, not Prachetas, the 9 Yogendras, Navyogendras, right? They were the sons of Lord Rishabdev. But you don't hear about them until 11th canto. You'll hear about the 9 Yogendras. They were all Mahabhagavad devotees and they traveled and preached. They just traveled and preached. 9 Yogendras, sons of Rishabdev. Bharat Maharaj, he was the oldest son, he became king. And this planet is called Bharatvarsh after Bharat Maharaj, who was the son of Rishabdev. So we hear, after hearing about Rishabdev, then we hear about the activities of Bharat Maharaj, and how Bharat Maharaj, how he, after renouncing the kingdom, gave up everything, went to the Ganduki up there in Himalayas, and somehow he got attached to a deer, and he ended up becoming a deer in his next life. So that's described. And then you hear about how his next birth, after the birth as a deer, he became Jadbharat. And he was born the son of a Brahmana. And then you hear about his activities as Jadbharat. And particularly it's very important to hear about Jadbharat's an encounter with Maharaj Rahugan. Maharaj Rahugan, he was a king who was going to visit holy places, and he needed somebody to help carry his palanquin. And he happened to select Jadbharat to help carry his palanquin. So Jadbharat was carrying his palanquin, and later in course of time, because he was carrying the palanquin and avoiding the insects on the path, so it was a rough ride for Maharaj Rahugan. And Maharaj Rahugan got quite angry at Jadbharat and began to chastise him. And then Jadbharat began to speak philosophically. And he revealed himself, because Maharaj Rahugan thought that Jadbharat was just some crazy person, just some useless person with no brain. But when he heard Jadbharat speak, then he understood he was really a very great soul who was really enlightened. And so Maharaj Rahugan and Jadbharat, they're discussing, you can hear the conversation between them. And Jadbharat also describes the material world like a forest of enjoyment. So all of this is described here in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then that brings us up to this chapter which we're finishing today, which is chapter 15. We're hearing about the descendants of Priyavrata. And we were hearing particularly about Maharaj Gaya the last few days. And today they're talking about another son. What was the name? Virajit? Virajit, yes. Yeah. So Virajit, one of the descendants of Priyavrata. And we'll go on to hear next chapter. Tomorrow we'll hear beginning the description of Jambudweep, because these kings were not ordinary kings. They were not just ruling this planet. They were ruling Jambudweep. They were really big kings, you know. Jambudweep, we don't even know about Jambudweep. We can't even dream of it, you know. It's beyond our comprehension. But they were ruling it. And the Pandavas, sometimes like that, they would go there. When Arjuna was collecting gold for the Rajasuya sacrifice, he would go to these kind of places. So anyway, that's coming up in the next section of Srimad Bhagavatam. But today, we want to speak in relation to the verse today, how there was a great soul, Virajit, appeared in this dynasty from Priyavrat. Although Priyavrat was a great soul himself, Vishwajit is considered the jewel of the dynasty. We're not told exactly very much about his activities. I couldn't find anything about him. But Prabhupada speaks about how you have one great soul in the dynasty, and one great soul brings so much credit to everybody in that dynasty. And Prabhupada gives an example, just like you may have one sandalwood tree in the forest. If you have one sandalwood tree, the aroma of the sandalwood goes through the whole forest, and the whole forest becomes, very aromatic due to the fragrance coming from the sandalwood tree. And Prabhupada gave this example actually. We had one devotee who joined in Hong Kong, one Chinese man joined in Hong Kong when Burijan, His Grace Burijana Prabhu, Burijan's very, very, very senior devotee, very learned devotee, and for some time he was preaching there in Hong Kong along with his wife. His good wife is also a very powerful preacher. She had been a movie actress before becoming a devotee, and she gave up being a movie actress to become devotee and to go out on Sankirtan. And Prabhupada arranged her marriage to Burijan and sent her off. She had joined in Los Angeles, but Prabhupada sent her to Hong Kong to marry this one devotee, a man she'd never seen before. So it was really interesting, that they were so renounced. Prabhupada arranged it, they did, and they're still married today. More than like 50 years, they're still married. And they're both very active in preaching. Anyway, Burijan recruited this one Chinese man in Hong Kong, and he's still a devotee also, although he's in poor health and old age, but he's still devoted. So his name was Yashomati Sutta, and he began translation of the Bhagavad Gita into Chinese. And when Prabhupada heard that he'd actually translated Bhagavad Gita into Chinese, Prabhupada was so pleased, and Srila Prabhupada praised him. He said, "You are a credit to all the Chinese race." He said, just like if you have one fragrant tree in the forest, the whole forest becomes glorified. Prabhupada said, because you have translated the Bhagavad Gita into the Chinese language, he said, you are a credit to all the Chinese people, to the whole race of China. And it's very nice actually that Prabhupada appreciated so much that work. And similarly, Prabhupada himself went to Moscow in 1971. At that time, Russia was very much communist, and it was really closed up. It was not Russia, it was all USSR. Today, they're all divided, they're all separated states now. But in 1971, it was quite difficult to go there. But Prabhupada somehow, with the help of his secretary, Shamsundar Prabhu, he arranged that they could go there. And their purpose in going, they had arranged a meeting with a professor in the Moscow University, who was a professor of Asian Studies, a Professor Kotovsky. So Prabhupada and Shamsundar, and I think maybe another devotee also had gone there with Prabhupada. And they were just in Moscow for a few days. And they were looking around and seeing Moscow, how it was in those days. It was really very drab, and there were churches. Russia have their own religion. They have a thing called the Russian Orthodox Church. And they have churches everywhere, all over Russia. So when Prabhupada went there to Moscow, he saw that there were churches, but there were soldiers guarding the churches. Because the nature of the communist society, they don't encourage religion. So even though the people may want religion, the government doesn't want to encourage it. And then the Russians had posted these soldiers outside the door of the church, just to restrict entry. Anyway, Shamsundar was there with Prabhupada, and difficult to get food. Prabhupada wanted some fruit or vegetables, some rice, and very difficult to find these things. So Shyam Sundar Prabhu was out searching to buy some rice so they could cook something for Prabhupada. So while he was out there in the streets, there was an Indian boy who his father was like working in the Indian embassy, and he was with a young Russian man. And they saw Shyam Sundar, and they could see that he was a Westerner. And so they asked him, "Do you have any Beatles music?" Do you know Beatles? Do you remember them? Yeah? Huh? Yeah, right. You know, the music group, they were very, very popular in 1971. So Russia, they're not allowed these kind of things. You know, that's not allowed, wasn't allowed in the communist regime. They don't want to encourage these kind of things. So they approached Shyam Sundar and asked, "Could you give us some, have you got any Beatles music with you could give us?" And Shyam Sundar looked at them and said, "Well, you know, I've got the guru of the Beatles with me here, right here. The guru of the Beatles is here right now. He's sitting in the hotel room. You want to come and meet him?" So they said, "Oh, yeah, sure, you know." So they went over to the hotel room and they met Srila Prabhupada. And this young Russian man was so interested. You know, Prabhupada began to speak and explain a little bit about self-realization and God consciousness. And this Russian young man, he immediately took to it, and he had so many questions. And he spent a lot of time there with Prabhupada, just hearing Prabhupada and asking questions and learning from him. And that young Russian man, Srila Prabhupada initiated him, Ananta Shanti. Yeah, he died some years ago, but this Ananta Shanti was the first Prabhupada's disciple in Russia, and he was so affected by Prabhupada's association that he took the message of Krishna consciousness around Russia, that he personally helped to bring more Russian people into Krishna consciousness. And they even organized the printing of Prabhupada's books and translation of Prabhupada's books, which were illegal. It was illegal. Just like in China, it's very difficult to print books. Because they know the power of the press. And Prabhupada himself said about how in India, in Calcutta for example, they have the books of the communist philosophy. There's a bookstore there which is all for communist books. And just simply through these books, the Russians had put some book. They brought some books there in English language. They brought some books there to Calcutta, and they made a little bookstore, and they were distributing these books about the communist philosophy, Marxism and Leninism and this and that ism. And from that, they introduced communism to India. That's how it came in India. No Russians came here to preach communism. How did communism get here in India? That you had Bengal, it was communist state for many years, decades. And maybe Kerala is still communist, I don't know. But it came, how did it come into India? Simply by their books. And Prabhupada gave this example. He said in the same way, he said, we may not be able to go to some countries like at Russia. Going into Russia at that time was difficult. He said, but send the books. And the devotees then, they really worked hard to send the books into Russia. And there's a book written about it. What's it called? Bread? Salted bread, right, salted bread. Yeah, you can read a wonderful book describing about all the tortures and the difficulties, the struggles which they had in trying to bring Krishna consciousness into Russia. But we do have a number of centers in Russia. We're not a major group in Russia, we're a minority group, but we do have a lot of very nice devotees. And actually, when you go outside of Russia, when you go to America, you go to London, you go different countries, you'll see there's a lot of Russian devotees. And they do a lot of service. So Prabhupada was the one who introduced Krishna consciousness to Russia. With the help of Shamsundar, they met this one man. And Prabhupada gave the example, he said, just like when you cook rice, you pick up one grain, and if one grain is cooked, you know all the rice is cooked, right? So everybody who cooks, you know that, right? So the same way Prabhupada said, this one man shows what is the mood in Russia. From this one man, you can understand how ripe this country is to introduce Krishna consciousness. And of course, Prabhupada sent some of his senior devotees, told them that they should preach there in Russia. And there were people, Gopal Krishna Maharaj, of course, he goes there regularly. He has many disciples there. And there are many other devotees. Indrajumna Swami, of course, he also has a lot of Russian disciples. He travels regularly there. And then Niranjan Maharaj also is very active there. And Krishna Kshetra Maharaj is very active. Many very senior devotees, they're doing wonderful preaching there in Russia. And we get good response. Many people, young people, coming to Krishna consciousness. Not only young, old people also. Everyone, many people, they really like Krishna consciousness movement. But there's opposition. There's always opposition. Prabhupada writes about this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he describes how when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was present in Mayapur, how the Chankazi came and broke the Madanga drum in the house of Srivas Pandit and stopped the Sankirtan. No more Sankirtan. Any more Sankirtan, I'll convert all of you to Muslims. So they were very afraid. So Prabhupada writes in that section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he said, where there is opposition to our movement, he said, this shows that our movement is bona fide. Because we're doing something good, we're presenting something very good, very powerful. So naturally the materialistic people who are more atheistic, they oppose it and they try to stop it. And so we always face these challenges in preaching. You have to expect there will be challenges. Even Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, when he was preaching in Bengal and Orissa and these places, there was opposition. There was opposition to him. At one point they even stoned they were doing parikrama, and at one point they all got stoned. There were so many, and there were threats on the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And Prabhupada also said, so much opposition. He said in Bombay or Mumbai, he said the opposition was from the municipality. At that time, Prabhupada was trying to build the temple at Juhu, and the municipality were opposing because of some influence by the man who had tried to cheat us in purchasing the land. So Prabhupada said the municipality are opposition. He said in Navadvip the opposition is my god brothers. And he said in Vrindavan the opposition are the pandits. You have to expect people will oppose you. You try to preach Krishna consciousness, there will be opposition. But wherever there, yatra yogeshwaro parto, yatra parturdan, tatra Sri Vijayo Buddhi, dhruva nitirmatirman. Wherever there is Krishna and Arjun, there will be victory. morality, extraordinary power and opulence. So we have to be determined. When we face opposition, when we face difficulties, we have to have faith to go on and to fight, and have faith that we can come out victorious, because wherever there is Krishna, there will be victory. So we have faith in that Krishna is there to help us. So just one person can make such a big difference to the whole country. This one Russian boy became a devotee, such a big difference. He could introduce Krishna consciousness to so many people. At one point, the KGB, which is the secret police in Russia, very powerful. The KGB said there are 3 threats to our country, and the 3 threats were it was the Beatles, I think, with the rock, the Beatles with the pop music, and then the other thing was Coca-Cola, and the third thing was Hare Krishna. Yeah, Coca-Cola. So these things, they felt these are the threats to their regime. But of course, Prabhupada told us, he said, because Prabhupada had told Tamal Krishna Maharaj he should go to China. Tamal Krishna Maharaj had come back to America, and he was preaching in America, and he was working with he had a party called Radha Damodar, and he had many buses and devotees all traveling and distributing books all over America. But there was some tension between the temples and this traveling party, because in those days, our movement, our temples were all supported by book distribution. So if somebody could distribute books, he was a very valuable man. You really wanted him to be in your temple, because he's bringing income for the temple. So it's very, we didn't have congregations. There was no big Indian communities in America in Prabhupada's time. And the temples were all young Westerners. So how to support the temples? We were distributing books every day. And the books would make a little profit, and that would go to maintain the temples. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj was running the Radha Damodar Sankirtan party, and they were giving all their profits to the BBT, which would forward the money to India to develop the preaching in India, because Srila Prabhupada was building the Vrindavan temple and the Juhu temple, and also trying to develop Mayapur. So he wanted money. And so he said, he said, India was the lame man and America was the blind man. Right? The lame man and the blind man together, they help each other. So he said, the American temples, they should help the Indian temples. At that time, 1970s, India was a different place. So money was coming from America, but there was a lot of pressure. Give more, You have to give more. Who's giving the most? Oh, you're great. You're really a big temple. You're the best temple. And who's distributing the most books? Oh, he's very famous, big book distributor. There was even one devotee, he would distribute so many books. Prabhupada said he is an incarnation of book distribution. And he's a very prominent, he unfortunately separated himself from ISKCON, but he's still preaching, and he has his own disciples, he has his own temples. He's a very dynamic person, Anyway, Prabhupada's an incarnation of book distribution. He could distribute books he could get anyone to take a book, So anyway, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was trying to run these buses, and he would try to recruit the young men, get the young men to join the bus. No, usually they would go to colleges and they get the young men to come out of the universities, give up the college and join Krishna consciousness. They're fed up studying anyway, you know. Why waste their time, you know? Go and travel with the devotees, have a good time. So he recruited many people, but some temples would complain because sometimes young men in the temple, they would become restless. That if we just stay in the temple, oh, I'd rather go on the bus with all the sannyasis and travel, it will be more exciting. So some of the young men who were in the temples would leave the temple and go and join the Radha Damodar parties. And that created a little tension between the temple presidents who were trying to maintain the temples and the Radha Damodar Sankirtan party, which was brahmacharis and sannyasis. Right? So the temple presidents complained to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada didn't like it. So he told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he said, this is not good. He said, you have to stop this. And Prabhupada gave some conditions and some restrictions. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, oh, Prabhupada, he said, I might as well go to China. And Prabhupada said, oh, yes, very good idea. You go to China. And said, no, Prabhupada, please. He really didn't want to go to China, you know. He said, no, Prabhupada, please, please. He said, you go to China or else you go to Mayapur, just sit and chant Hare Krishna. Don't do anything else. Like that. So Prabhupada gave him the ultimatum, you see. So he was supposed to go to China. For some time, lasted. Later on, of course, he became Prabhupada's secretary and he was serving Srila Prabhupada. The final year before Prabhupada departed, he was personally taking care of Srila Prabhupada constantly. And he did wonderful service for Srila Prabhupada. And after Prabhupada departed, then he had to consider about the instructions which Prabhupada had given him. And so Prabhupada had told him, you know, that you should go to China. So he thought about it. And so he came to Hong Kong and he developed Hong Kong. At that time there was nothing much there in Hong Kong, but he came to Hong Kong and he got people to put some money in there and to support it. And he developed a temple there and recruited some Chinese people. And then also he got more and more books translated to Chinese. And we tried to send the books into China. And we'd send books into China. In those days, in 1970s and 80s, the Chinese people were coming to Hong Kong to work. Nowadays it's a different way. Hong Kong people go to China to work. Although maybe not with the COVID, but up until COVID it was like that. The industry is in China. It moved out of Hong Kong to China. But in the 1970s and 80s, Chinese people were all coming to Hong Kong and they were working in Hong Kong. So when it came to things like Chinese New Year, they would all go back to their home in China. So we would all go to the train station and we'd give out books to people. We'd give out Chinese books to them to take back to China. And in this way, we'd send the books into China. And similarly, the devotees, you know, Germany was divided, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and they would send the books. Somehow they would smuggle books. They would find ways to smuggle the books into the eastern part of Europe, into Russia, and into all these, Ukraine, all these places. They would smuggle books. They would put books everywhere, put them on ships. They'd just put wherever they could. They just try to get these books somehow into Russia. And I know we distributed the books in China, and you know, we had the experience. One man got the book, and he saw the book, and he loved it so much. He came to us, he said, I want to help you spread this knowledge all over China. He was a Buddhist man, actually. So he believed in reincarnation, and he was a vegetarian. So he liked very much our books, and he tried his best to help us. And he's still alive, and he's still very friendly with us. Now he's a Buddhist monk, but whenever we have programs, he will come. And he's very nice. He always speaks very favorably about Krishna consciousness. So you can see the effect. You distribute books, you know, it really works. It really affects people. Another young man, he got the book, and he was picking out sections from the book, and he would copy it out, and he got big pieces of paper, and he'd write up different sections from our books. He'd write it and paste it on his wall. We went to his house. His house was covered with big, you know, sections from Prabhupada's book. He stuck them up on the wall. It's so nice to see how much people really appreciate Prabhupada's books. You know, Prabhupada said in the future, because we were struggling to distribute books, but Prabhupada told us, he said, in the future, people will line up to get your books. And actually it happened. Not only in countries like Russia and China, but even in America sometimes, people would line up to purchase Prabhupada's books. We'd go to these colleges in the USA, and they have these places in the USA. The college is like a city. It's just huge, you know, and it's full. The whole campus, so many buildings and hostels and so many students staying there, and so many shops and everything. And so you go there, sometimes we'd go there and distribute books, and people would just come and line up to get Prabhupada's books. They were so eager. They appreciated so much, like Bhagavad Gita, Krishna book. So Prabhupada actually understood these things. He understood the importance of distributing his books. And he told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he said, even you can't go into China. He said at the present moment, he said, just send the books there. And the books will do the work. The books will create the field for the preaching. And we actually see it, that the books do. They created the, and he told us also, he said this communist thing is not going to last forever. And we see in Russia how it's broken up. Now Russia is much more open. There's still difficulties, it's still difficult, there's still challenges, but still it's much better than it used to be. And now we do have devotees, many centers there, and preaching is going on. So this is really how Krishna consciousness works. Just, you don't need a lot of people, you just need one sincere soul. There's a saying that one moon is better than millions of stars, right? You may have millions of stars in the sky, but you don't get a lot of light. But if you have one moon, that one moon, that can benefit the whole planet. So like that, one devotee, one pure devotee can change the face of the earth. When we see how much Srila Prabhupada changed the face of the earth, just by his preaching, by his determined effort at the end of his life, how he dedicated 10 years at the end of his life to introducing Krishna consciousness. And there are so many more devotees coming in the future. More and more people will come and take up Krishna consciousness. So we give great importance to the young children. The young children, I was just in Bangalore, and in Bangalore there was one couple, one of their young sons, he recites the whole Vishnu Sahasranam. Of course, we don't recite Vishnu Sahasranam really ourselves. Why? Because we just chant the name of Ram, right? You don't need to chant Vishnu Sahasranam. One name of Ram is equal to whole Vishnu Sahasranam. But anyway, this family, they're devotees in Krishna consciousness, and they're also from Madhva line. So their son learned the whole Vishnu Sahasranam, and he was only 6 years old. So it got in the Guinness Book of Records. The youngest child to recite the whole Vishnu Sahasranam at age of 6. So like that, we've got promising devotees coming up. I saw yesterday going to the Gurukula, the young children there, the young people there, and certainly it's very encouraging, very promising to see these young people take up Krishna consciousness. So we're sure in the future there will be many wonderful devotees to help us to spread this Krishna consciousness. We don't need a lot of people. We just need pure souls. One pure soul can do everything. Just like it's described here, that one soul, it's a jewel. It said Haridas Thakur is like the jewel of the Gaudiyas, because Haridas Thakur chanted so much the holy name. He had so much faith in the holy name, so he's like the jewel. And so there's so many jewels in Krishna consciousness, in the parampara. We want to understand more their mood and their mission and appreciate them. And then we can also propagate Krishna consciousness. We'll have more faith and we'll become more enthused to propagate Krishna consciousness and to follow, try to follow in their footsteps, to follow their example. Okay, are there any questions, any comment? Anyone?
Prabhupada found everywhere, especially on foreign lands, difficulty in spreading our KC. And such rigid nations like Russia and Chinese, there were, we can say, there were isms, communism and that type of things, where it was even the arrow or any bird cannot go inside. In such situation, still they made successful, not only break that isms and spread KC and make the whole world, the people over there who were ignorant, innocent and ignorant, and so that's why they become knowledgeable and have the nectar of KC. So as we can say, as a squirrel on that lowest level, how one pure person who is following all this purity and chastity, vegetarian and all that, these our four principles, but still many a times, because in our this especially Maharashtra, I'm a teacher, so the people or the small pupils also were diluted by tobacco and that gutka type. And it is very difficult to give moral and spread that values of religion is very secular. But through morality, how can we, the teachers can spread a religion or that KC? This is my...
Through morality? How can
morality, yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, it's certainly unfortunate that India became secular. That happened also in USA. In America, they used to have prayer every day. It was the custom that every day in the classroom, they would begin the day with prayer. But one politician, one lady politician, said, oh, this is not good, we're indoctrinating people into our belief, we shouldn't impose our belief on others, and everyone has a right to decide for themselves. And so they all agreed, they had no more prayer. And that was the end of prayer in the classroom, unfortunately. And so your concern is you want to encourage morality among the school children. And how to help them? Well, the parents have a lot to do with it. You see, the home in which they're born in and the upbringing which they have, that's very important. If they can have if they're born in a home where the parents are more religious and pious, then it's a bit easier for them. If you have children who are brought up in a one-parent home, you know, maybe the child is brought up with the mother's separated from the husband, and maybe she has a boyfriend or something. Well, these kind of things go on. And so the child is aware of this, you know. They say, somebody said to me one time, they said, oh yeah, my mother, she goes out with other men. My father also goes out with other women. You know? So if you're brought up in that kind of environment, then it's not good. It's very difficult for children to understand the importance of morality. So how to somehow get through to them? We're trying. Education is very important. We do want to educate people about values of life, and that's going on. The one devotee in Delhi, he has published some books on it, and he does do a lot of courses, and I think devotees are also here in Nashik, they're also doing. They're trying to teach values. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of enthusiasm. We have to think also how to introduce this to a manner to attract people. How to attract people into these things. Sometimes, you know, in places like USA, if you try to speak to people about morality, they just laugh at you, you know. They think, what's wrong with you, you know? They just can't follow, they can't accept it at all. It's just something so far away from them. The thought of moral principles. And there was even a case, you know, one Indian family who lived there in America, so their daughter was going to school, and so it happened that another boy at the school, he invited her, hey, let's go out together, you know, I'll take you out. And so she said to her mother, is it all right for me to go out with him? And fortunately, the mother said to the daughter, she said, if you go with that boy, you're no longer my daughter. So that's the kind of stance sometimes you have to take like that. You have to really be very determined and very serious to let people know the importance of these kind of values. Moral principles are something really important in life, and they will certainly, if we don't have that kind of morality, then we're certainly living a hellish life, and we'll go to hell. That will be the destiny. So it is important for us to try to teach these things, but to teach them in a manner in which somehow to make it attractive and appealing to people. We do want to speak about the dangers which are there in immorality. What happens? What kind of society does it lead to? What is the future of people who are engaged in all kinds of immoral activities? How they suffer, the agonies. So of course, we don't just want to make it all what the Christians call hell and brimstone preaching. You know, if you only speak about the miseries and the suffering which you undergo, then it won't be so effective. But if we can speak about the joy and the happiness which comes by practicing a moral life, that it's much more pleasing and satisfying, and that you will have a much happier life by practicing moral principles. The mind will be more peaceful, you can be more stable in your family life. People who are not moral, then all the time so much disturbance in the home, and there's always the threat of divorce. You don't know how long the home will stay together. But people who are practicing moral principles, they can live peacefully and happily. They don't think, we don't even consider that. There's no consideration of divorce. Marriage means no divorce. And Srila Prabhupada would often impress that on devotees entering into family life. He said that you're getting married, now you are lifetime companions. Lifetime companions, that should be understood with the marriage. But it's not understood, unfortunately, by a lot of people today. So it is important for people to hear things like, you know, Ram Leela, Ramayana, and these kind of Mahabharata, these things, sometimes they help. And gradually bring in the Krishna conscious philosophy. So teaching is a very challenging profession. And certainly as a teacher, you have the greatest responsibility. I remember teachers at my school, they would often say, don't smoke. But the students would say, but sir, you smoke. You know? And so that kind of teaching is no good, you know? You want to teach to people, you have to teach by example. And so Prabhupada writes about that the teachers, the heads of state, the heads of family, they all have that responsibility to show the example, to set the standards by their example, exemplary behavior. Okay, thank you for that. Hare Krishna. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go back to Vrindavan.